Sturgeon is going to be the next First Minister of Scotland. I think today, this is a good day for Scotland. You know, before 1997, John Smith, Donald Dewar, Robin Cook, and so many others, including Sarah, and I remember her father too, pointed the way for devolution and argued for it to happen within the United Kingdom. Then in 1997, Wales and Scotland led the way by creating parliaments in their own countries. Now the whole of the United Kingdom is asking for control to be moved and transferred from the centre to local areas. Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle, the North East, the North West, the Midlands, right across the United Kingdom. And so what Scotland has led in the last 50 years is now being followed in the rest of the United Kingdom, and we should be proud. And just as we Scots have built the Britain of the past, so I think we Scots should play our part in building the Britain of the future. I also want to say something else. There was a missing element in the devolution plans of the past. We were so keen to get powers into Scotland, into Wales, and now to get powers into other areas, that sometimes we forgot there was a missing element. And the missing element was we left the centre of the United Kingdom unreformed. We had an unreformed House of Lords. The centre was holding on to too much power. Devolution and decentralisation was not happening in crucial areas. And now today, we can rectify some of this. Because we have a centre that, in my view, under the Conservatives, that is completely out of touch with local needs. It's out of date because it has not reformed itself. It's out of its depth when it tries to micromanage decisions, as we found over the pandemic, that should be made locally. And of course, we have seen in so many different instances, it's out of control. Corruption, cronyism, contracts to friends. We're seeing it only that in the last few days in some of the scandals that are being reported. Abuse of power, abuse of patronage, and no doubt we'll see in the next few weeks when Boris Johnson has his resignation honours list and Rishi Sunak has to approve it. Another example of cronyism in practice. So Keir Starmer, to his great credit, has said this morning at the launch of the Commission report that he supports a massive change, the biggest shift of power out of Westminster and Whitehall that we have seen. He's creating a mission statement for the United Kingdom, something the Nationalists said we would never do. That our aim as a United Kingdom is to abolish poverty. Our aim is to have a universal health service to continue free at the point of need, no matter what government. Our aim is to have a safe environment. Our aim is to have secure defence. A mission statement that gives people a clue and a sense of what the purpose is of the United Kingdom. And he's moving power, as he said this morning, out of Whitehall, out of Westminster, all over the country. 50,000 civil servants to be transferred, agencies to go outside London, jobs to come to us and to other parts of the country as a result of that. And of course, he's creating new rules and new standards that the Tories would never do. No second jobs for MPs, no foreign funding of political parties, new standards in public life, an anti-corruption agency and an ethics commission that will be responsible for monitoring standards, with the public having a role as a citizens' jury in reporting on how these are upheld. Now, what does that mean for Scotland? It means that Scotland can be proud to be part of a United Kingdom that is being transformed. A new role for Scotland in the UK, because we'll have more membership in the new reformed Second Chamber, which will reflect the regions and nations of the United Kingdom in a way it doesn't do at the moment. We'll have more power because we will be part of the Council of the United Kingdom that will be chaired by the Prime Minister, that will deal with issues affecting Scotland, Wales, and of course Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. And we'll be part of a new Council of the Nations and Regions, again chaired by the Prime Minister, to look at the major issues that concern us, whether it's pollution or pandemics, because we know that you need to cooperate on these issues so that you get the best for the Scottish people. There'll be a new role in the economy too, because we are devolving the whole job centre network so that employment needs can be met and skills needs can be met in the local areas where people live, to match jobs to the needs of employers, Instead of being run from London, 640 job centres will be run locally by people who know what is happening. And we've got a new stake in the new British Regional and National Bank that is being proposed by the Commission, which will be the big bank for investing in the growth industries. Precision medicine in Glasgow, you've got obviously environmental industries, wind and wave, you've got hydrogen, you've got video games industry in Dundee, all these new clusters of economic activity where the Scottish National Investment Bank is too small, the British National, Regional and National Bank will come in to invest in it. And new powers internationally, because we're saying that where there are devolved matters, the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish Government should be able to sign international partnerships and international agreements with other countries. You can join Erasmus in Europe, the Skills Agency. You can be part of UNESCO, which is the Education and Science Organisation. You can be part of the Nordic Council. All these things, because these are devolved matters where it's right that the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people can have an international role. And a new status for the Scottish Parliament itself, because we are entrenching the powers so that no government in future can remove or undermine the devolved settlements that are agreed. And we're giving new status to Scottish MSPs so that they have the same rights to call out injustices without fear of prosecution in the Scottish Parliament. But we're doing more than that, because what we're saying is this is about power not just to the Parliament. This is about power to the Scottish people and to the people of Britain. And double devolution means that we are calling for the election of local mayors or provosts, and at the same time we are calling for the devolution of many of the functions from Edinburgh, where it is far too centralised, to the communities of Scotland which best know what their needs are. And so you see, these is a stronger Scotland in a transformed United Kingdom. And just think of it this way, that the ground is now shifting in the debate about the future in Scotland. You know, in 2014, I had so many people saying, I'm voting for independence because I don't think there's any other alternative to change Scotland or to change Britain. Now we have an alternative. Now we have a set of proposals that are groundbreaking, that can actually show we can make a difference. So the debate is no longer between the status quo and independence. The debate is no longer between yes and no. The debate is no longer between change and no change. The debate is between change within the United Kingdom, led by the Labour Party, and change by leaving the United Kingdom, which would not benefit Scotland under the Scottish National Party. And just... And just in conclusion, think of it this way. The Scottish National Party may want to fight the election with a one-line manifesto. The Scottish National Party may want it to be a one-issue election instead of a general election. We will do the opposite. We will fight on the social, economic, political and constitutional change that we will bring about in Scotland and across the United Kingdom. We will fight on jobs, on the health service, on the future of technology. We will fight on the environment. We will fight on all these issues. And we will show that the best way of standing up for Scotland is by voting Labour and voting for Keir Starmer, the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Gordon, I think the heavy lifting has been done by you and your team, and I think it's gone down pretty well. I want to go to Keir first. We're going to have a conversation this afternoon. Keir, this is potentially transformative to the UK. Do you want to say a bit more about what your hopes are from Gordon's Commission?
Yes, please. Can I start by thanking Gordon and the Commission for all their work, because it's a fantastic piece of work that they've put a huge amount of effort into for the best part of 2 years. And I want to be absolutely clear that I asked Gordon to do this piece of work because I've long thought that one of the things that's holding us up as a United Kingdom is the hoarding of too much power at the centre. And I think that's held us up politically, with people across the whole of the United Kingdom, including here in Scotland, feeling that Westminster and Whitehall are remote, that you can't influence what's going on, there's not enough control over communities and life where people are, and economically, because the single biggest failure of the last 12 years in Westminster has been the failure to grow the economy sufficiently. And I profoundly believe that amongst the reasons for that is that we have not used the talent and resources of all parts of the United Kingdom, including here in Scotland. That's been hardwired into my political thinking for a long time. It's there in my conference speeches. It's there in the speech I did on the economy earlier this year. And that's why, after discussions with Gordon, I said, would you set up this commission and report practical recommendations about the biggest devolution, the biggest movement of power and resource and decision-making away from Whitehall and Westminster to ensure that we can answer both the political question of our time and the economic question of our time. And we can go beyond that to build a new Britain and a new economy within a new Britain. And I'm delighted today to be able to launch the report alongside Gordon and to warmly welcome everything that is in it. And we will now go on to consult on refinement, on testing, and crucially on implementing the recommendations. And I want to say two things about that, because in the report itself and in discussions Gordon and I have had, we made it clear that we wanted recommendations capable of being implemented in the first term of a Labour government. And the reason I want to do consultation now is because I want that consultation, particularly about implementation, to be complete by the time we get to the election, so that when we get elected in, as I hope we do, sometime in the next 2 years, we will be a government about delivery. We will not be a government that is consulting at that stage. It's very important that we understand we're going to inherit a United Kingdom whose politics and whose economy are badly damaged, and we will need to be hit the ground running and to do this from day one. So I'm delighted to take all of the recommendations forward on that basis. I think it's an important, compelling case for change across the whole of the United Kingdom, but it is also a compelling case for change here in Scotland. I thoroughly endorse what Gordon has just said about being now able to take the argument on to say it's not change by leaving the United Kingdom versus the status quo. It's change within the United Kingdom that is the alternative. A stronger Scotland within a changed United Kingdom. And it's really important to me that we can now take that argument forward at the next general election. And we will set out in our manifesto our missions, what we seek to achieve as an incoming Labour government. And then we will have a mandate to carry that out in government. I look forward to, therefore, consulting on the recommendations, turning that into a concrete mission, winning that general election, then bringing about the change in the United Kingdom and here in Scotland that we desperately need, and we've been desperately needing for a very, very long time. So, Gordon, thank you very much for all of your work. I think this now makes it absolutely clear that the argument that we want to make about the future of the United Kingdom, of course, draws on our history and the things we've done in the past, but is much more about the future than it is about the past. It's where we go from here, as I say, a stronger Scotland within a changed United Kingdom. And I'm really, really pleased that we've been able to launch this report today. Thank you, Gordon, and thank you, Sarah.
I mean, I think it's great to hear that commitment from you, Keir, that actually this is going to be part of the day job. And I think that's absolutely critical for us in Scotland, because we've seen the Tories riding roughshod over devolution. And I want to come to you first. How do you think we can make this work to end the binary, divisive political conflict Scotland has really suffered between yes and no for the last few years in Scotland? How do we use this as a stronger Scotland and a transformed UK?
Thank you, Sarah. And can I first of all repeat the thanks to Gordon that Keir has just done for an incredible piece of work and demonstrating the depth, the knowledge, the ideas that will truly transform our UK and, as Keir has said, strengthen Scotland in a reformed, changing, modernising United Kingdom. But I also want to thank Keir directly as well, because, let's be honest, for 12 years in Scotland, people haven't believed that we could deliver a Labour government and therefore deliver change. That's the difference with this report. People believe a Labour government is possible. People know there is a better way of doing things, and that will be delivered by Keir Starmer as our Prime Minister in the first term of a Labour government led by Keir. That's a transformative change. The third point to make is this also breaks away from that SNP impression that somehow anger, frustration, disconnect and discontentment only exists in Scotland. Actually, that anger, disconnect and discontentment is in Edinburgh, it's in Glasgow, but it's also in Liverpool, Birmingham, Manchester, Cardiff. And that's why this is a plan that, yes, strengthens Scotland, but it also pushes power out from Westminster to the nations and regions of every part of our United Kingdom. That means reforming the House of Lords. That means giving greater transparency and accountability on the House of Commons. It means greater responsibility for the Scottish Parliament, but it also means greater control for local authorities and local government here in Scotland, because for too long we've had power sucked out of our communities and centralised into Holyrood. That is a plan that is for every part of our country. The other point to make is, for too long the argument has been that it is somehow the status quo versus leaving the United Kingdom. The reality in Scotland right now is there's not a majority in favour of a referendum. There's not a majority in favour of independence, but neither is there a majority for the status quo. But there is a vast majority in Scotland and across the UK for change. Labour is that change to deliver for people across the country. And the change we're offering is not just, to answer your point directly, Sarah, the change we're offering is not just constitutional change. We are offering democratic renewal, social renewal and economic renewal, so people can have, yes, more say and more control of their lives, but we can also see a Labour government lifting people out of poverty, re-strengthening and growing our economy and bringing our public services into, yes, the 21st century, but also preparing them for the 22nd century. That's what's on offer in this campaign, and that's why we're hungry for the general election in Scotland. In Scotland, Labour no longer fears an election. We are enthused, energised and ready for a general election, because Scotland's going to lead the way in electing a Labour government and making Keir Starmer our Prime Minister.
Gordon, I want to bring you in, because on one level we treat devolution as the norm and our aspiration in Scotland, but this is really radical for the rest of the UK as well. Do you want to say a bit more about that? Because I think for many in England, these are really different proposals to what they've experienced in the past, a much more centralist approach. Do you want to say a bit more about the radical stuff you have in here about English devolution?
Yeah, just think of what's happening around the whole of the United Kingdom. People now know that the new jobs, they're not going to come from a British Steel, they're not going to come from multinationals only. They're going to come from local companies that have new technologies, have world-beating products, are innovative and can show that they're internationally competitive. And what we identified in this report, and it hasn't yet come out in the way, and I hope you'll read it, is nearly 300 hotspots, economic clusters around the country, in life sciences and medicine, in environmental renewable technologies, in digital and AI and all these other areas, and in the creative industries. And they're all around the whole of the United Kingdom. And they're in Scotland, and they're in Wales, and they're in different parts of England. And what they need is locally sensitive policies, so that they can invest in the training and skills that they need. They need the local job centre, and it needs to be working for them and not for some central authority. They need training and skills, so they need the devolution of the colleges into the local areas. They need research and development, so they need this new British Regional and National Investment Bank. And what you see from all of the different parts of the United Kingdom, Tracy Brabham spoke brilliantly today in Yorkshire as the Mayor of West Yorkshire, Andy Burnham in Manchester, Jimmy in Newcastle, you've got Steve Rotherham in Liverpool. All over the country, what they're saying is, give us the powers so that we can create the jobs of the future, so that we can build the economy of the future. And it's the same in Scotland. There needs to be devolution from Edinburgh out to the rest of Scotland as well. But the important thing is, we're all talking about the same thing, changing the United Kingdom, making it more sensitive to local needs, making it deliver for people, not just in Scotland and Wales, but in the whole of the United Kingdom. And that's why we'll see that there'll be great support across every part of the United Kingdom, supporting Scotland's ambitions, supporting Wales's ambitions, and supporting the regional ambitions in England. That's the change that we've seen in the last few years, and that's the change that we identify in the report. But I tell you, it means 1 million new jobs around the country if we can get these clusters of economic activity the support they need to develop as major industries of the future. Scotland Precision mentioned, I said, but there's so many other industries around Scotland that will be memorable in the future, just as shipbuilding, steel and coal was memorable in the past, because they will get the support that they need from the policies that we are proposing to pursue.
So can I just add to that? Because this is such an important point about the economic clusters, because this is an answer to the question, why have we not been able to grow the economy over the last decade or more? And that is profoundly because we haven't done it across the whole of the United Kingdom. Wherever you go, and loads of people in the audience will have seen this, wherever you go, whatever the place is, there is local ambition, there is local brilliance, innovation, business, etc. But we've never transformed it into clusters for the economy of the future. And that's what this report is all about. It's actually a report which in years to come people will look back at and say that was the turning point between an old economy that wasn't working and a new economy that actually has worked for the whole of the United Kingdom. So these clusters are absolutely important. And that's why we've got to be really bold about what we push away from Whitehall and Westminster, because I profoundly believe that those with skin in the game know best what works in their place and in their community. And the decisions about people should be made as close to where they are so that they can influence them as possible. And that takes courage. And so as we come into government, as I hope we will, our first act, as it were, will be to push that power, the biggest transfer of power away from the centre to where it should be. And it's not giving up power, it's putting power back where it should be so that the economy can be turned on its head and the new economy can emerge in that way.
Yeah, and I think, Anas, you've been going around Scotland visiting businesses, talking to trade unions, with a huge ambition to tackle that economic inequality. Do you want to say a bit more about how we get that double devolution in Scotland as well?
So one example of the economic clusters, think about the jobs first transition we need. We have been promised now for 15 years a green revolution. Who can remember the promise of the Saudi Arabia of renewables that just hasn't been delivered? Through action from a UK government that recognises the need to put our energy transition front and centre of our economy, we can get hydrogen in the North East, we can finally do carbon capture right, we can transform our green jobs revolution here in Scotland and therefore lead the way again in Scotland but demonstrate leadership across the rest of the UK. And in terms of the double devolution, look, we're in the city of Edinburgh where they have seen firsthand the consequence of a government that sucks power and resource out of the council, doesn't starve us of resources and then points the finger of blame. Can you imagine if we had Edinburgh with greater powers, greater responsibility, working in partnership with its other local authorities, what more it could do to drive the East Coast economy, the exact same in Glasgow, what they could do to drive the West of Scotland economy, in Aberdeen and Dundee, what they could do to drive the North East economy. That's what we mean by double devolution, pushing power out of our parliaments and into the hands of local people.
Yeah, and I can see the councillors nodding their heads right around the room.
I can see Councillor Cammy Day is very happy with that approach.
I think that respect, I mean, it's both respect for Scotland, but also within Scotland, and we've not seen so much of that. Can I pick up one of the points you made right at the start, Gordon, about Labour being the party of devolution and the need to entrench that devolution to actually, to tackle the problem we've had with the Tories riding roughshod over devolution. Do you want to say a bit more about that? Because for me, that's one of the exciting bits
one of
in
the things
report.
that's happened, and Keir may wish to comment on this as well, over the last few years, particularly after 2016, was that the Conservatives have undermined the devolution settlement. Instead of what was called the Sewell Convention, that they would traditionally not interfere with areas that were devolved to Scotland and Wales, they've ridden roughshod over it. And what we want to do is to ensure that we can say to the people of Scotland that the devolution settlement will be entrenched and that no government can easily just remove it or undermine it or just take it away. And that's why we propose that the new second chamber, if it is democratic, it will lose its power to hold up legislation for a year, but it will gain a power to uphold the constitutional rules of the United Kingdom, and that includes, and will be central to it, is the devolution settlement. So what we're envisaging is a new kind of constitution. I mean, as you know, in America there are 100 senators for 30 million people, and in Britain there are now 830 lords for 65 million people, and both are second chambers, and it just doesn't seem right for the future. So we reform the House of Lords, but we make it a second chamber that is representative of the regions and nations with a duty to uphold the devolution settlement.
I think that's quite exciting because it's really about modernising the UK, isn't it, Keir?
Yeah, I think this is really important because, as Gordon, there's been a lot of discussion about what we do with the House of Lords and abolition, but it's very important that alongside abolition, there is to be a second chamber, and that has a central purpose, which is to safeguard devolution and other constitutional issues. And that is an important part of the change that we want to bring about. So it's not just abolition, it's abolition, second chamber and repurpose. But that's part of a wider ambition, which is to ensure that all four nations have more of a say in what we do. That's the whole point of the Council for Regions and Nations, to make sure there are those powerful voices. And I think, Gordon, there's the Sewell Convention, but I think there's also, even in COVID, we saw the government in Westminster disrespecting Scotland, not bringing Scotland in, not actually seeing any duty to cooperate and work as one group of four. And I think that in the report is therefore not just this business of the House of Lords becoming custodians, but going a lot further than that. I think the stuff also on international treaties, it's all really important in relation to the influence and power and strength of voice that Scotland and the other nations have.
You know, I think there's a bit about parliamentary accountability, which, you know, is often discarded both in Scotland and at the UK level. And I ask you what to come in.
You've got two governments. You've got a Tory government and an SNP government who actually make a virtue out of conflict, because actually neither of them believe in devolution. And actually making a virtue out of cooperation is really, really important. That's about respecting people's authority, respecting the democratic right that they have, so respecting the roles of our mayors, respecting the roles of our first ministers, respecting the roles of our parliaments, but that respect has to go two ways. And through cooperation, I think we can achieve so much more. And that's the plan here, to strengthen Scotland's status, of course, give Scotland a stronger voice, but also recognising that the UK works for us across the UK when it works, and also reform it, transform it, and modernise it ready for the rest of the 21st century.
Yeah, so timing. Timing's everything in politics, isn't it? So we've got this plan now. Keir, do you want to say a bit about where we go next? You're saying we're going to manifesto, consultation. This is real stuff now, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a really comprehensive report. I hope some of you have had the chance to read it or get the chance to read it, because it is a compelling set of, not just a report, but a set of recommendations ready to be taken forward to the next stage, which is that consultation. Now, the consultation isn't just a sort of vague exercise. It's a statement of intent, so far as I'm concerned, which is, if this is to move from recommendations to implementation, it is very important that we're serious about how we implement. And that means we need to have discussions with those affected by the recommendations being implemented to make sure we're in a position to take action immediately we get into power. So that's the purpose of the consultation. I don't want an incoming Labour government to be in the business of carrying out consultations. I want Labour government to be coming in to carry out the change that is vitally necessary for our country. And I invite everybody, whether they voted yes or no, whether they live in a town or city or wherever they are across the United Kingdom, to be part of that discussion about implementing these recommendations, because we know that it is the delivery of this change that matters. There's plenty of discussion about change. This is actually a compelling case, not just for change, but how you bring about that change. And it will be the mission of the next Labour government to actually deliver on that. And that's why we want to have this discussion from now until we put the manifesto together and go into that general election.
Brilliant. So there is a challenge to all of our elected representatives in the room, of whom there are quite a few, and all to our party members and activists. Read this report. It is compelling. It's fantastic. Gordon gave you a fantastic flavour of it, but we need to go out and take this to our communities, to bring it to people so that they understand what's in here and how it could transform Scotland and the UK. If you just look at the economic stats in there, it is appalling how unequal our economy is across the UK and in Scotland. So this is an agenda for change. It's an exciting agenda for change. And as Keir has said, it's going to happen. So let's make that happen together. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm now going to hand over to Keir, because I think you want to take a couple of extra questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think we're going to take some media questions, and I hope I've got the list right. I think we're going to Glenn first from the BBC.
To Gordon Brown, in 2019, Labour promised to devolve employment powers and unlimited borrowing powers to Holyrood. Why have these ideas not made it into your report? And to Keir Starmer, if this is such a big shift in power in the UK, would it need to be approved by the public in a referendum? And in any event, shouldn't you have the courage in Scotland to test these ideas against independence in a Scottish referendum?
Well, the new Chancellor will immediately consult on new borrowing powers for the Scottish Parliament. So I think that answers your first question. Why is it such a big reform? Because it's the whole of the UK. It's making the UK work for Scotland. Some people talk about it in terms just of powers for the Scottish Parliament. It's powers for the Scottish people to improve the economy. By the Council of the UK will discuss all the major economic issues that come up, chaired by the Prime Minister. We're devolving, as I said, the job centre network. We've obviously got the British Regional and National Bank. All these things are vital to Scotland's future. Investment, and I didn't mention this, joint investment ventures with the European Investment Bank. Now, that's something the Conservatives and Nationalists are not proposing. We are proposing that we work with the European Investment Bank to get infrastructure investment here in Scotland. So these are big changes. But if you look at it, the whole of the United Kingdom, it's the biggest transfer of power out of London, out of Westminster, out of Whitehall. And it's also an insistence that there is a new Westminster and a new Whitehall. We're saying new rules for MPs. We're saying new rules for managing the second chamber. We're saying new rules for the way the centre conducts itself. So I don't think anybody should be under any illusion when they read. I'm afraid it is 155 pages. And I want to thank Jim Gallagher, who's here this evening, who was very important, former head of devolution in the UK government, now helping this report. I want to thank him for the work he's done. But when you read it, you'll see the scale of the proposals and how they will transform Britain. A stronger Scotland in a transformed Britain.
Glenn, on your second point, the way I see it is this. We will now consult. We will then draw up our manifesto, and that will be absolutely clear missions about the change that an incoming Labour government would bring about. It won't be an A to Z of Labour Party policy. It will be crystal clear story about the future of the UK with clear missions within it. And obviously we will go to the electorate with that. That is our offer to the electorate. If we are returned to power on the back of that manifesto with those clear missions, then we will have a mandate to carry out that change, including the change that we need to bring about in Scotland within a changed and stronger United Kingdom. So that will give us, people talk about mandates of other parties a lot. We will have a mandate as an incoming Labour government to carry out what is in our manifesto. We'll be absolutely clear about what that is. People will read the report and the recommendations today. They will, we're being absolutely transparent and clear about this. Those are the recommendations. We will now turn those through consultation into a mission. We'll put those missions before the electorate. And if we're elected into power, we will have a mandate then to carry that out. And I think very many people across the country are crying out for change. And I don't think there's any time to lose in bringing about that change. Thank you, Glenn. I've got Colin, please.
So, Keir,
Colin.
You wrote over the weekend that I have always believed that the people best placed to decide what works in Stirling, Sunderland and Swansea are the people there, yet you won't let the people in Stirling or anywhere else in Scotland decide their future through a referendum. And a question for you, Mr Brown, you're talking about a democratic second chamber. Why are you talking about taking the power to delay legislation away from it?
Well, just on the first point, in relation to allowing people to choose, we will put a choice to the electorate of the next election, an absolutely clear choice, and a powerful and compelling choice, because, as Gordon said, and I think this is the massive takeaway from today, change goes up against change. Change by leaving the UK goes up against change within the UK. So the old argument that it's change by leaving versus the status quo has gone. This is change versus change, and that's very important. We make our case on change, but we make our case on change, and then we go to a general election and put it to the whole of the United Kingdom. And if we're elected in, as I say, we then have a mandate to carry out that change. And many people say to me about what mandate the SNP or other parties may have. We, the Labour Party, will have a mandate. If we have put that change to the electorate have voted for that change, and then we can carry it through as a mission of the next Labour government.
Let me be clear. There is only one chamber in Westminster that is supreme, and that is the House of Commons. And nobody should be suggesting that a second chamber will take over from the House of Commons. We don't see the case for the House of Lords in its present form or the new second chamber rejecting for a year legislation that has been passed by those people who have been elected on a democratic mandate by the people. But we do see the case for a new function for a second chamber, and that is to uphold the Constitution. You must be aware of all the scandals of the last few years when the government of the Conservatives have tried to ride roughshod over the House of Commons, ride roughshod over the Constitution, even ignore the Supreme Courts. Ministerial codes have been avoided, everything else. What we need is a chamber that will uphold the Constitution. That will be the devolution settlement, but that will also be the constitutional statutes that uphold the human rights and social rights of people in the United Kingdom. So we have got a clear function for a second chamber, and that's why we don't think it should persist in delaying legislation that has been passed by the Commons. It can amend it, but it will not permanently delay it for more than a year. And at the same time, we think there is a function for a second chamber, and that is to uphold the democratic settlement that is agreed for Wales and for the regions of England and for the cities of England, as well as for Scotland, across the United Kingdom against a government that tries to override these constitutional statutes.
And Neil.
Thanks. First, yourself and Gordon, have you considered proportional representation for the House of Commons itself? Is that something you'd like to see, even if it's not part of this review?
It wasn't part of the review, just to be absolutely clear. Just as a factual point, it was never part of the review, and we knew at the very beginning that that was not going to be part. There are many, because there are many electoral systems across the whole of the United Kingdom. There's a different one in Wales and Scotland. There's a different one for electing mayors, a different one for local government in Scotland against local government in England. There are many, many different forms of electoral organisation, and we decided that it was best that these decisions be left to the Labour manifesto in future.
You say you're in favour of devolution within Scotland. Part of this report refers to elected mayors. Which cities in Scotland should have elected mayors? How would that work out? What would the process for that?
Well, Neil, we published our Strengthening Local Democracy paper over the summer, which goes side by side with this fantastic work about how we reshape Britain. And within that, it's about local people to decide if they want to go for that model of partnership local authorities, or indeed want to go for an elected mayor or provost model. That should be for people to decide. But a good example of what we're talking about is if you think about through the height of the pandemic, when decisions were made that impacted on the city of Manchester, and you saw Andy Burnham on the front of the town hall with council leaders across Greater Manchester standing up for his local community against decisions made in Westminster. Now, in Glasgow, we had a very similar situation where disproportionate decisions made that impacted Glasgow, that weren't impacting on the rest of Scotland, but you didn't have the same leadership being shown in the west of Scotland to stand up for that local authority and the surrounding areas, because it was a council leader that thought they were there to serve the interests of the Scottish Government rather than serve the interests of local people. That's why having strong local voices that strengthens local identity but also delivers locally is so important. That's why our Strengthening Local Democracy paper stands side by side with the paper we published today.
Look, this has been a fantastic session. It's a stronger Scotland in a transformed UK. So let us all in this room work together and make that happen. Thanks to the panel.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Good.